Hello and welcome, everyone. My name is Jono Sasolska. I am a developer advocate here at HashiCorp, and I wanted to thank you all for joining us for today's Consul Community Office Hours. Brief recap on how these office hours run. Please feel free to take advantage of the chat that is happening on YouTube where the live stream is going. We'll answer those questions live as we're going along. At the start of each of these, we want to try and provide a little bit of an overview of what our theme is. And today we're talking about performance and metrics and how those work. With me today, I have a couple of different individuals, and so I'll go through and do introductions, starting with Derek.
Hi, I'm Derek Strickland. I'm a product education engineer here at HashiCorp, and I work on the Consul Kubernetes content, specifically on learn.hashicorp.com. And with us today is also Kit.
Hi, I'm a software engineer on one of the Consul core work streams on the Foundations team. Yeah.
Hi, my name is Daniel. I'm also a software engineer on the Consul core Foundations team.
Awesome. So Derek, I just wanted to get started today. There's been a lot of content that the education team puts out, and I know you as an education engineer have some of your guides being used by thousands of people. Can you talk a little bit about some of the work that you've done on metrics and monitoring specifically with the Learn content?
Yeah, so I joined HashiCorp about 6 months ago, and one of the first things I was tasked with was revamping our Prometheus Grafana metrics guide. It was consistently performing as the least popular tutorial on Learn, and I came in and gave it a little spritzing and kind of fleshed out the content a bit, went into depth on how to configure all the Envoy hooks for Prometheus, Grafana, etc. And now it's consistently ranking as the #3 Kubernetes content on the Consul Learn side. So we've had some great success there and more coming.
Awesome. Thank you so much. We'll be dropping the link to that Learn guide in the chat. So for those who are joining, please feel free and take a look. Derek, if people wanted to provide feedback on these Learn guides, what's the best way to go about doing this?
Yeah, so we've added a platform feature actually earlier this year where you can, at the bottom of any Learn tutorial, there is now a component that will allow you to provide feedback directly on that screen. You're also obviously welcome to join us on our Discuss forums, but the best way is really to use that component at the bottom of the Learn tutorials.
Awesome. Really great having that fast feedback in place. So with that, let's jump into the meat of what we're going to be talking about today. And Kit, I'll go ahead and turn this over to you.
Yeah, so one of the projects we wanted to take on for Consul's 1.9 release is tackling some of the thorny metrics issues that we've had sitting around for a while. So when we talk about server metrics, we mean metrics that help you observe the server cluster. So that's anything that's a voting member or just a read replica or a non-voting member. And that sort of core console or that core quorum that serves requests for Consul agents. So that helps you make informed decisions about what your cluster is doing, you know, if it's healthy or unhealthy, which you definitely want to fix, or just get an idea of what your workloads look like, you know, like how many DNS requests you're making, KV requests, stuff like that. I think it would be a really fair assessment to say that Consul has a tough learning curve. There are a lot of metrics per host. There are a lot of hosts in clusters. So a lot of the times it means just a lot of hours or, you know, just time in general in your dashboard software, whether that's Prometheus, you know, or you're reading out of Prometheus, just to get a sense of like how these work. So with that time spent, like you're becoming experts on your own, and there's more that the team can do to help you with that. Then next. Basically, Consul was using a model of observability that had started a little bit before the project even started. And there had been some advancements like using Prometheus instead and like the model that changes as a result. So it was getting a little crusty. You know, we had to shake the rust off a little bit. So in a few places, we were just emitting more metrics than we needed to when we could use labels. Particularly, there's the HTTP metrics that you're going to be able to see compressed if you use 1.9. There was certainly some questionable Prometheus behaviors, where as a quirk of the translation layer that we use, metrics would not sort of appear, quote unquote, in Prometheus until they were used for the first time. And if you're Prometheus aficionado, you know that like that doesn't even make sense when you think about the client libraries, but it was just a quirk of Consul's behavior. And our docs could use improvement, you know, looking at the telemetry page on Consul.io. There's, you know, little improvements to be made there. So as a part of 1.9 and some follow-up releases, we have some things planned. A few particularly high cardinality metrics, like I was mentioning earlier, have been compressed down into labels. They don't go away in 1.9, so you don't have to worry about like your dashboard suddenly not working. But there's config there if you want to disable some of the high cardinality metrics, and there's also prefix filters, so you can sort of tune it based upon what you need. We are starting to work with this class of like secondary metrics, where yes, there's the things you need to know if Consul is like working or not, but then there's other workload specific features like what are KVs doing, how's ACL replication doing, you know, how's the catalog doing, all those things that you want to know to get the baseline, but aren't necessarily your like key indicators that you want to be alerted on. So we're improving the documentation for that, and also working that into official dashboards so you can, you know, be more informed based on your workload, whether that's debugging or just, you know, vanity metrics if you just want to know how many, you know, catalog updates you have. And then of course we're going to be fixing known problems because there was a lot. I went through GitHub. We like looked at every bug that had been submitted and saw what was in scope and what wasn't. In particular, customers have been asking for Prometheus, you know, whether it's enterprise or just like our open source users. People are using Prometheus a lot now and they're finding the edge cases. Thanks to a particular fix where we will initialize most, not all metrics, but like 99% of them, especially the ones that you need to know, those will all be initialized. You don't have to worry about going into Prometheus and just not seeing the metric name. The metric name should always be present, even if it's not being emitted or measured at that particular time. So that's a nice one. There's some other bug fixes in there. Like there's just some jank that's fixed. Like you won't have like peer IDs at the end of metric names, which should be a label now. So it should be far easier to aggregate. So yeah, just a bunch of different stuff in a bunch of different places that, you know, we needed to target a major release for because they were breaking, but together it sort of forms this server metrics project, which has been pretty fun to work on.
Awesome. Well, if you don't mind, I'd like to just ask a couple quick questions here. First off, if I'm just getting into metrics and observability, what is cardinality and why should I care about it?
Yeah, okay. So cardinality are the number of things in a field. So if we are, typically it comes from database terms, where if you have like 1 million entries under usernames, then that starts to become a problem. Like if your hardware can't handle that, or you need to seek through 1 million names every time you want to make a simple query to just like render a Facebook page, or, you know, if there's 1,000 names, then you're getting into some high operation territory. So there's various strategies to deal with this. In metrics, in particular, we just created a lot of names for stuff. So in the HTTP case in particular, we would do consul.http, and then in the name itself, break down every slug in the URL. And if, you know, maybe that made sense in 2013, but what we saw now is that creates just a ton of individual metric names to look at, which kind of takes you away from looking at the things that are important. You know, if you want to aggregate on all HTTP metrics, then you had a lot of names to hunt down.
Gotcha. Yeah, and with that operational complexity, like we're going to probably talk about a little bit more here, there's a cost associated to it. There's the overhead of managing all of these different things and navigating these UXs that are in some cases a little dated, all the way to, what's the cost on the servers that are trying to keep track of all of this information, your Prometheus servers, your dashboards, and making those useful rather than just tuning that signal to noise ratio.
Yeah.
Awesome. Is there anything else that you wanted to mention about the official dashboards? I know you mentioned that we're gearing up for a release for Consul. So is there anything that people would need to be aware of if they're looking at our newest release for these dashboards?
Yeah, so I don't know where the link for that is going to land exactly, but we do plan on publishing one, perhaps more dashboards on, I just think the Grafana like registry. I think it's just called like Grafana dashboards. I don't think it has like a higher order name for that. But you can go in there now. There's like community dashboards there. Datadog also has a community dashboard that we've looked at, and it's pretty good. It uses a lot of Datadog's like post-processing. But for people who are looking to spin up their own dashboards, like using their own hardware with like Prometheus and Grafana, you should have a lot more sort of leverage there. Everything that you need to know will be upfront, and then if you want to drill into more debugging level stuff, then there's going to be options there as well.
Awesome. Awesome. So with this, we now know that how Consul monitors things is being updated, but let's talk a little bit about some of the use cases. What can these monitoring really indicate about how Consul's performing? And with that, I wanted to have Daniel talk a little bit about one of these upcoming improvements that is not necessarily getting as much airtime, but especially for our larger deployments, is quite valuable.
Thank you. Yeah, so I'm going to talk a little bit about event streaming, which is a project that I've been working on for the Consul 1.9 release. So event streaming is an alternative to the traditional synchronous REST or gRPC APIs. Usually you have a client and a server. The client remains mostly stateless, and anytime it needs to do some work, it makes a synchronous request out to a server, gets some data, and does some work with it. Event streaming is a little bit different. And instead of making a request out each time that a client needs data, it will maintain a persistent connection to the server, and the server will actually initiate data sends. So anytime some state on the server changes, it will send an event along. And the client has to maintain a view of all of that state locally. And if the client ever gets out of sync, it will have to kind of start from scratch and re-request all of the events to get back into a synchronous state with the server. So what problem were we trying to solve with event streaming? We've had a number of reports that in our largest Consul deployments, it can take quite a bit of CPU to handle the load of blocking queries. So Consul clients or client agents, or just agents sometimes as they're called, make a large number of blocking query requests to servers. And this is often called long polling. And it does that, the clients do that so that they can be notified whenever some state on the server changes. And whenever that state does change, the server has to send back a very large response. For example, in a large cluster, there may be thousands of nodes and tens of thousands of service instances. Every service may have thousands of instances for it. And if one of those instances of the service changes, the health of that service changes from healthy to unhealthy, the server would have to respond with a payload that includes all 1,000 service instances, all of the health check data, all of the nodes that it's on, which is very expensive to serialize and also takes quite a bit of network load to transfer. We could compress it to save some network, but that would increase the CPU even more. So we looked for a way to cut down on all of that work that was necessary every time there was a tiny little change to the server state. And so event streaming was a good fit for this problem. Whenever some state on the server changed, instead of sending back a large payload with all of the data with only a couple bytes changed, it was able to send just a much smaller event, which may have contained just the data for that one service instance. And the clients were able to keep track of all those state changes in their own local view. And whenever anyone made an API request or a DNS request for service discovery to one of those clients, it was able to fulfill that request without having to go back to the server, requesting kind of the entire large set of data and then reserializing across the wire twice. And yeah, because events are much smaller, it takes significantly less CPU to serialize them, and it also takes a lot less network transfer to send them across. And so here we have kind of an example using our metrics to see the significant differences we have between these two flows. So on the left, we've got CPU utilization of servers and network I/O of servers. We can see that CPU was effectively maxed out at the beginning before streaming, and networking was 5 gigabits in this particular benchmark. And then with streaming enabled, there's still a little bit of a bump at the beginning because we have to generate that initial state, but it is quite a bit less CPU even at the beginning. And then network I/O is orders of magnitude less. So we can see kind of from our metrics, and we can use our metrics kind of to test out these solutions and see that for a particular cluster we're able to see real improvements with streaming.
This is really awesome because, as I mentioned before, this is something that many people may not necessarily see the initial benefit of, but as you start scaling up your deployments, especially multi-region deployments, multi-cloud deployments, and trying to aggregate this information across all of your diverse topologies, doing this at scale really does start to save you not just your compute power, but your time for needing to do this. A question that I had is the difference in event information effectively like a git diff to the state rather than passing the whole state as if it was like cloning down the entire repository?
A little bit, yes. We'll be building up more streaming endpoints in the future. The current one is Service Health, and Service Health, it's kind of a diff. It sends back just the details for one service instance. So a service running on one node you will get the whole payload back. So it's not exactly a line by line, this has changed, but it is, in a sense, it is very, very similar to a git diff, yeah.
Awesome. Really looking forward to seeing how these changes end up making impacts, especially on larger deployments. So if you're someone who's running this at scale, please let us know so we can hear your stories about it. Derek, was that something you wanted to follow up on?
Well, it looks like we've got a question coming in, and I didn't know if we were ready to move on to that segment or not.
Yeah, let's jump right into the questions we have.
All right, so somebody's asking, would there be, and I think this, I'm not quite sure who would be best suited to answer this question, but it said, would there be a way to only subscribe to a subset of the data? Perhaps that's about the dashboards. And I mean, obviously the dashboards, you can configure whatever levers you want to watch, right? Context seems a little missing there, folks. If you want to follow up, we'd be happy to clarify your question.
Yeah, I could also see that being asked in the context of streaming as like an alternative way of optimizing the long polling responses. So more context there would be definitely helpful.
Yeah.
All right.
So within streaming, there are ways to filter. You can use for the event feed. Yeah. So you can use a key. So if you're only interested in one particular service name, then you can filter that way. And then you can also use the B expressions that are currently available in the API to match particular fields, nodes, things like that.
Awesome. So we'll see if there's a little bit more context that pops into chat and we can revisit that. Another question that we have, and this is something that we can round robin is what are some of the more interesting metrics you've been using lately, either in things that you've been monitoring for your own personal projects or ones that you feel should be, hey, I think these are the ones that we need every single time. Let's start with Kit.
Yeah, so I'm not sure if this is an advanced tip, because if someone's really familiar with metrics, they may not consider this an advanced tip. But to me, every time we emit summaries, which is when we aggregate timing data, we emit the average, we emit the P90, P99, standard stuff. But there's also a count associated with that where we emit multiple metrics for this aggregate. And that count also gives you the number of requests that have happened. So this isn't something we really document in Consul directly. We just sort of provide this prefix of here's your timing data. But something we're leveraging in the dashboards is that count associated with the summary lets you count how many DNS requests you have, how many like KV operations, although that one KV we do separately, so you can get rates for it. I'm trying to think of another example where I was able to like provide a count, which isn't something we recommend in the docs, more by omission than choice. I think it was, maybe it was KVs. So that's really useful because if you look at the rate of requests that are, or basically of measurements that are emitted, then you can get just the raw usage of a particular feature, which is nice to have, particularly for debugging, because if you know what your average KV operations are per 5 minutes, or you just know what to expect there, then if there's a massive spike, then that helps you say, okay, KV operation spiked. That's why this key indicator is going weird, it's slower or whacker in some way. So that's what I think was pretty cool, is pulling the count off of summaries.
Daniel, how about you? Anything in particular help with streaming or being able to keep track of large workloads?
Oh, I don't know if there's one in particular. We saw definitely like CPU and network metrics were very useful when testing out streaming to make sure that it was giving us the improvements we wanted. Yeah, I don't have. I've been so focused on streaming, I don't have anything else top of mind right now.
All about making sure those CPU cycles stay well used. That's what we're trying to get here for. All right, Derek, anything from your guides that you would want to highlight when it comes to monitoring metrics?
Yeah, so, well, not in the guide specific, but the Consul Kubernetes team is doing some work to try to expose pod health up to the Prometheus server, monitoring utilization all along all the same vectors everyone here is pointing out. In terms of educational content, something interesting sort of in this space that I've been tinkering with lately is Jaeger instrumentation of services. So through proxy defaults, we can expose Jaeger collectors and grab some Envoy layer metrics, which is great, but it doesn't tell you a lot about the internals of any given service. And so we've got a piece of content coming out soon that it isn't necessarily HashiCorp specific, but it's good for the community just to try to show folks how this is how you can instrument your services using the Jaeger Open Tracing Go SDK. And I also want to give a quick shout out to a really cool guy on Google GitHub named I'm gonna mess up his GitHub username, so I'm sorry. It's it's either J Moiron or J Mo Iron, something like that. And he's got she has a really cool instrumentation library called SQLX, and with some very simple modifications to your database code, you can actually see your SQL calls as individual spans inside of Jaeger, and you can kind of like debug your slow performing queries and things like that. So that level of instrumentation type stuff is what I've been looking at lately.
Awesome. So with that, I have a follow-up question. we have a really diverse panel. You've worked on all different parts of the Consul code base, and we've highlighted some of the stuff you've worked on. What about some of the challenges? And Derek, I'll start with you, and we'll go in reverse order of what we did last time. What are some of the challenges that you came across while either working on the content that you've been putting out or the feature that's up and coming?
Sure. Well, a big part of the challenge, some of this is just the job description, is just, there isn't content yet about how to do something until I write it, per se, right? So, it's just sort of like finding the right actors to talk to. And then when you do, it's just this golden moment of gratefulness. It's like, oh, I found the golden ticket. This is great. Some of the challenges too have been trying to anticipate what matters to our clients, what metrics are important to them in their place. And honestly, a lot of it, I was just overthinking. It is the simple stuff like, well, what's my disk IO? What's my network utilization? What's my, do I have slow performing queries? And then some of it is just like, I don't even know how to make all these things talk to each other. What are the hooks? What are the syncs that like I'm running Prometheus and Jaeger and Grafana all at once, and I don't know how to make them all talk to each other. And so just trying to simplify the explanation for how to glue all the components together is the big challenge, and then bring it down to a consumable format that people that are maybe not native speakers, right? Because that's another challenge that we have to deal with when you have an international company like we do. So trying to find a way to make the complex seem simple, I guess, is maybe a great way to distill it all down.
And that's a really hard balancing act, because even with speaking the same language, so sometimes we can run into the fact that naming things is hard. Sometimes what we feel is ubiquitous, something like, hey, this is an upstream or a downstream of this. That one gave me a lot of trip up when I got started. And being able to level set and say, no, this is what we're talking about, regardless of where you're coming from, trying to make that approachable. And then moving forward to say, like, we're going to try and account for the happy path, but until you go and try it in your own environment, you won't see what breaks. Daniel, how about you? What are some challenges on making something like streaming work?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think, I'm fairly new to the team. I've been working on Consul for less than a year, and streaming was a fairly broad feature. It kind of touched a lot of things in Consul. Consul has been around for a little while. It has a surprising number of capabilities and different features, and I think going through and just understanding how it fits into everything was quite a challenge for me.
And just to follow up on something you said, we currently are looking at this for one endpoint. So these benefits for other endpoints we still have yet to implement. Is there a way that the community would be able to put out their requests for other endpoints where this is beneficial, or their own stories of how they're using these?
Absolutely, that'd be great. Another kind of big change that's coming along with this is that we're moving from Go's NetRPC to gRPC. And so I think potentially, because it's gRPC, there's kind of more opportunities for integration there. But yes, absolutely, would love to hear from the community about what endpoints they use, where they would see streaming valuable in their workflows, and if there are any kind of performance bottlenecks they see in their larger clusters that would benefit from streaming. We'd definitely like to know that, so we can kind of plan the order of things going forward. Yeah.
And for anyone who's running Consul in production or at scale, we do have a survey form. If you go onto the consul.io website, you'll be able to see a Tell Us Your Consul Production Stories link. So please feel free to follow up there, and we'd be more than happy to chat about what your experience is running Consul at scale and in production. Kit, what are some challenges you ran into with working on metrics?
Yeah, so the one that's been like I guess the biggest challenge, and that has taken the most time, has been the technical and organizational challenge of sharing a like a sort of translation layer metrics library, where anything that we want to fix for Consul also affects Vault and Nomad. And I'm actually not sure if the other projects use it. I should know that offhand, but in particular, we've been working with Vault and Nomad on it. And so that also makes any changes high impact. You know, like if we find I think we found a particularly good solution for the Prometheus like initialization thing, like Daniel and I have been talking about this for like literally months. So it's nice to see that getting merged in. And part of that is like, it's always one more thing where like maybe some of the rust or the cruft that we've seen in libraries is that sometimes the hosting application of a library where like we have the Raft lib inside of Consul. Consul's the application. Raft will just call metrics dot, I want to sample this with a label. And it inherits its config from Consul or Nomad or Vault. So if you want to declare that metric, like where do you declare it? You know, do you add a new package in Raft? Do you define it when it's called and then it exists forever, which is like runtime inits that we were considering, and it's still on the table as a good solution for that. So when I was talking about like the 99%, like you still haven't quite figured out the Raft replication libs, but it's also a small and very specific metric that you may look at one running Consul or Vault, but it's not like critical to their operations. So it was just like, okay, we can come back to that. But that's been an interesting challenge, has been sort of designing not just for Consul, but for Armon/Go metrics, and making sure that like we had an initial solution for this where you could just make sure that metrics never get deleted. You just flipped a flag and they never got deleted, which works great for Prometheus, but there's some cases where you don't want that. So now we have it like on a per metric level, where if it's initialized, then it lasts forever and it shows up immediately when the process starts, and it sort of does the things that you would expect as opposed to feeling like a translation layer. So that's been a fun and interesting challenge. It's been a lot of discussion and like good discussion, because now we like have a patch that I feel pretty good about. So that's been the fun and interesting challenge. The other challenge is like getting a hold of other products to be like, hey, we need this for 1.9. Please review. So challenges.
And I think they're totally valid challenges though, right? Because where some people have one product, we have many, and we want a solution to be the right solution, the right workflow for our practitioners. And the only way we really get to be able to do that is cross-team collaboration, and also hearing how different people use different products. So thank you for bringing to light the challenges that aren't just, hey, this code is tough or old. It's how do we work together to make this work for everyone involved?
So John, it looks like there's a question that actually came in for me. So I'll field that real quick before we move on. Somebody's asking, is there any chance that HashiCorp will publish reference production configuration and not just snippets on the Learn platform? I would say that the likelihood is somewhat proportional to your willingness to go on the platform and leave feedback in the component at the bottom of the Learn tutorial in question. We really do pay attention to what people leave there. And if you went through some tutorial and you found yourself at the end of it going, yeah, but what about this, or what about that, or that was great for getting me up and running in terms of a dev server or my local machine, but how do I do this in production? If you can leave those questions on the specific content, we will absolutely look at that and incorporate it into our roadmap so that we can give you a better experience with our products. So that's how you can change the world right there.
And I'd also like to put out, if you are looking specifically for guidance around your architecture or what you may be looking for, please feel free to post on the Discuss forums what your potential future architecture is. not just because HashiCorp employees can respond there, but because our community, who may have different experiences or experiences in very niche areas, may be able to provide more tangible feedback right out of the gate. But we do recognize that the visualization of this is a solution and this is where Consul fits is a benefit as well too. We don't want to say that we can cover all of them, but we'll definitely be looking at how to make these more vivid and present and available based off of the feedback that we receive. So please tell us what you need. Cool. So I appreciate you fielding that one, Derek. I'm going to go ahead and just ask, with Consul 1.9 on its way, what are some features that you all are really excited about? Maybe not just the things you've worked on, but things that you know are in the pipe. And Kit, start with you.
Yeah, so there's a lot of exciting things that we're working on sort of in the near term. I guess we're figuring out where exactly those land on like the roadmap. Something that is not at all at the roadmap, but I just thought of that we hadn't talked about in a while, so don't expect this in 1.10, is we wanted to implement tracing inside of Consul. I think it's like maybe a fun bit of trivia, unless you're a contributor on Consul. If you want to like see the request pass through and then go back to your application, then like, yeah, it could be interesting. But as a developer and like contributor on Consul, like I just really want to be able to see the network traffic before or between servers and between data centers. Because that's something that you just have to do a really big think about right now. We don't like, or you can just like Wireshark it and then have a big think about it. It's not something that we have a ton of instrumentation for. There's like certain technical blockers that we have for it. Like you really want contexts for doing that in Go. So you can pass around the span ID for the request lifecycle. Or not the span ID, the trace ID. It's the other, there's two IDs. So that would be awesome. The technical challenge is that like gRPC is just better suited for it. Like we'd have to do a lot of like manual plumbing. So it's like, it waits. I'm really excited about it because I just want to see the beautiful traffic flow between nodes and then like have like a really crisp mental model. But in the meantime, I guess doing like the heavy lifting of just thinking about how the RPCs flow is probably it's the hard way. We'll do the hard way for now.
Gotta love the hard way and the big thinks. I'm gonna start using that now. Daniel, how about for you?
Yeah, I think one of the features that was worked on for 1.9 is layer 7 intentions, I believe, L7 intentions. I think that sounds pretty cool, being able to do, I believe it's like traffic splits and routing based on kind of like application layer fields. Sounds really cool.
Derek, how about for yourself?
Well, I'm really excited about Kit's upcoming dashboards for one, because I'm going to be splitting the Grafana. So there's so much content into that one guide right now. It's going to become a collection and it's going to get extended with more content. And so I'll be able to write more about what Kit did there and incorporate some links directly to the community dashboards on the Grafana portal. So I'm pretty excited about that. I'm just kind of an event streaming junkie, so it was really cool to see what Daniel did and how much. I love seeing things go from it performs okay to holy crap, it's just orders of magnitude. When you hear the word it's orders of magnitude in terms of speed improvements, I get really excited. Another thing I'm pretty excited that is sort of going to be enabled by 1.9 is some of the changes that have happened in Consul Kubernetes around being able to configure our config entries like service splitter, service router, service intentions, et cetera, as CRDs. Gonna be talking about that a little bit at KubeCon. That was built on top of the functionality that specifically the service intentions functionality that's part of 1.9. The rest has been backported to earlier versions. So yeah, there's just a lot of goodness coming along down the Consul pipe these days. It's a lot of fun to report about.
Yeah, I would be here for another hour if we talked about all of the things that the Consul team has been working on. The two things that I personally wanted to highlight is The new improvements that are coming to the Consul snapshot tool that have been worked on by Sarah make it so that the snapshot information that you're getting is more usable. And especially for operators in DR scenarios, you want to be able to trust that the information that you have is going to be mission critical and correct when it's available. And so these quality of life enhancements that you see, even on small commands like this, go a long way in making the actual running of Consul easier and a more enjoyable experience. To that, the other improvements that we've seen in visualization make that troubleshooting substantially better. So a huge shout out to everyone who works on Consul UI and the new visualizations. We saw them demonstrated a little bit at HashiCorp, but I can't wait to see the iterations that are going on this particular project. So thank you to all the teams who are working on that. Please feel free to give any feedback that you have as well on these tools so we can know how you're using them. And Derek, it looks like we have a couple questions coming in. Would you mind following up on them?
Yeah, definitely. I was just trying to queue them up. So we've got this question, just sort of a general question. So I think we could probably all provide some info here. Says, I'm using Consul on a project. Oop, scroll off screen. I'm using Consul on a project and it's working fine, but its port 8500 and API is exposed publicly and is flagged as a high security risk as per Tenable Scanner. Any docs I can refer to for fixing this? So, so we've got our general security docs that we're going to, I think, drop in the chat as a reference point. Anybody on the panel have any thoughts about that question?
Yeah, my follow-up would be like, what does your network configuration look like? Like, are you running in AWS or like GCP? Are you running on your own hardware? Because making any like port and network configuration recommendations is like very, very, I guess, architecture dependent. People don't use it, or just like network setup dependent. So I want a little bit more information before making recommendations there.
Yeah, and while we're waiting for follow-up, just a few comments on that. The documentation around our security model can help demonstrate a lot of what the expected functionality of Consul is, but it being more situation aware, I would say let's bring that question up on discuss. Feel free to tag any of the panelists as well too. But having a little bit more context for what's the network topology, what are the security concerns, is this just, hey, we have a tool and we're responding to this tool saying it's insecure, or are there architectural concerns that are fundamentally there? That type of feedback lets us know, hey, where are the tools that people are using with our tool set as well too? How do we interact with them? And then what are the expected functionalities that people are getting out of it? For that API, making it accessible, there are ways that you can turn off the API endpoints or use HTTPS. We do also recommend that in our Learn guides as well too. Daniel or Derek, anything else that you wanted to follow up on that question with?
I think that was a good bit of context right there. Not seeing anything else right now in the backlog. Let's see. So I guess what would be next? What's coming down the pipeline in 1.10 and beyond? Have we covered that thoroughly?
So the foundations team kind of had like a jam session before where we like rated stuff we wanted to work on and like stuff that was important. We have not yet built a roadmap out of that one yet. I think it's been a summer, I think. So we're kind of like being chill coming into 1.10, where we were doing like a lot of like pretty intense feature work for a bit. That's at least where the foundations team is. I don't really have a roadmap to point to.
And I would have to probably follow up with that. That is still one of those things that we're seeing come together for the next release. But if you want to have your voice heard in terms of things that you're using, or features, bugs, issues that you're passionate about, please provide that either on an existing issue in our GitHub issues by commenting or reacting on it, as well as follow up on our Discuss forums. With existing issues, we love having issues linked to it, revived, bumped with contextual information. So please add whatever you can to these requests, because as we're going through them, it allows us to see where features may have a larger blast radius, or where certain internals changing need to be improved as well too. We're always looking for feedback. Trying to sift through all of it is a challenge, to say the least. So Derek, I did have a question. With all of the Learn content that we have going on, how can people navigate the recent changes to Learn? And what are some tips and tricks that you can provide for us on the platform that have made this a more enjoyable experience, especially with all the information Consul has out there?
Yeah, so we recently, everyone's probably seen by now, so I guess it's within the past 2 months or so, we've relaunched a new general information architecture on Learn. You'll notice that we've kind of moved away from the older navigation approach that we had, and now there's a single navigation on the right-hand side, or the left-hand side, pardon me, and you'll see topical areas, and we call those collections, and collections are just sort of a arbitrary grouping of tutorials. We've stopped calling our guides and started calling them tutorials, because we think that's sort of the more accurate description of what they do. If something is called a guide, it is actually probably more like a production readiness or enterprise architecture reference material. So that's an interesting bit of nomenclature change to make note of for your own orientation as you get into Learn. So the collections may be ordered or unordered. So they may be like a sequential set of like, for instance, when we split the metrics collection up, it's sort of each section will build on the previous, right? And so it'll give you a linear way to navigate through the tutorials. But unordered collections will just sort of give you a tile set to choose from, and you can pick a topic within the super category. You can pick a subtopic. And then always resident now at the very bottom is sort of a sitemap that we've added that can give you that almost all of it will fit on a 17-inch laptop monitor. So you can just sort of like say, okay, what's everything we have available for Consul right now, and Learn. What's Vault and Terraform, not going to fit on a single screen, I don't think. But I do think the Consul tutorial information's there. We've also integrated a search provider, Algolia. A little shout out to those folks into our Learn experience. So hopefully that can help you find what you're looking for more quickly. We're constantly doing work to try to cross-link things on the Consul.io developer documentation website to content on Learn, and vice versa. So that's hopefully another way to help with discoverability for everyone. You might see tutorials or appear in more than one collection. We did that by design. We feel that some things, are sort of cross problem domains, so to speak, and so need to be referenced in each area contextually as it's relevant. And then, of course, the feedback component is my favorite one, because you sometimes you write these things and you wonder if anybody, we can watch the analytics and know that people read them and what have you, but to really get somebody to stop and take the time to say, this was good or not, but here's how it could be better. We really enjoy getting that from the community.
Awesome. And I have to say, I love the interactions that I've had working with the entire education team. The content is something I find myself referencing multiple times a day, let alone however many times in a week, and really appreciate that hands-on style of learning. Also started seeing a lot of these embedded terminals as well, too, to help make the process a lot easier and a lot cleaner for my local machine as well, too. So with that, I do see that we have another question, and this one's kind of open-ended. I'll let anyone speak up for when they want, but what is it that has drawn you to working on Consul, or initially drew you to working on the team? I know for me, something that I enjoy about Consul is that Consul forces you to challenge your conventional perceptions of how things are supposed to talk to each other in this service-oriented world. That learning curve can be both a boon and a bane, but once you start saying, how do we take this conventional way of making services or applications talk to each other and really challenge it and make it easier, it's one of those things that is now on everyone's mind. And how do we make networking easier? How do we make DNS and all of the fun stuff that comes with trying to find services easier? And that's been a real joy to see grow and evolve while on the Consul team.
Well, I can say for me, I mean, I've just been a very big fan of HashiCorp for a very long time. I remember seeing Vagrant 2013, 2014, something like that. Maybe even a little earlier. I can't remember the exact launch date. And it kind of changed my whole mind. I was always the developer that also had to care and feed for the servers when servers were pets, not cattle. And I saw Vagrant and I was like, oh my God, I see a cattle world. This could really happen. And then Docker came along and I was like, oh, look at this. This is so cool. But how do you make them all talk to each other? Like I would build these homegrown, I had a set of code like so many people do that just went with me from job to job, right? Like this is my configuration management library. And this is how I find where I need, my services. And this is how I look up settings from a central database or whatever. And then cloud happened and that just couldn't scale. And why would you want to deal with binary updates and everything else? And so just getting to work on a cutting edge solution to these problems I felt like a kid in a candy store. I was like, please sign me up. Thank you. So it's kind of a no brainer. And then on top of that, the culture here is phenomenal. The coworkers here every single day. I just feel like every day people make me smarter, and you can't, that's better than gold.
So I've also been like a HashiCorp fan, I guess. I kind of, back in 2016, I worked at a startup and we were migrating a application from Heroku to AWS. And once you're like maintaining your own host, there's like a slew of other challenges. So I figured I was like hip and with it. I knew what coordination stores were with like etcd and Zookeeper and stuff. So when I was looking at that, I was like, oh, Consul gives us building blocks, but then it also gives you features on top of that. So having used Consul to like build failover systems where the two nodes didn't have to watch each other, they could coordinate it along a lock, and like build out feature flags using Consul's KV system. That was like, that made me like really appreciate Consul, and like not just the technical backing, but also like the UX concerns that were put in, where like you wouldn't typically think of like an enterprise networking suite server cluster or whatever, whatever the quick tagline is for Consul. You wouldn't think about it being delightful, but in the context of what it does, I think it does some pretty like beautiful and delightful things. And then after getting out of ops, just to keep my heart rate down, I got into like distributed systems research and like poking holes and verifying models for it. And after doing that for a few years, like mostly alone, there was like two of us. We talked a couple times a week. I was like, okay, I want to work with a team again. Like, what's going to be the best fit for that? And that's how I ended up back at HashiCorp. So instead of just poking holes, now I poke holes and fix them. I don't just wake up every morning and say, I'm going to make some new problems. Some mornings, that's when I write issues. So yeah, it's been an adventure. Been great working with the people on the team, and like seeing the team grow to the point where we've had to create new work streams and then like figuring that out. It's been a good experience. I like working here. It's the short of it.
Yeah, I guess I can share as well what brought me to Consul. had a little bit of experience working in open source, and I really enjoy it. And I think that was a big draw. I've been, dabbling in networks for a while, and I really like the opportunity of getting to kind of dig in deeper and understand how a tool like Consul that provides a service mesh actually does all the things it does. And I also think like service meshes are actually, even though they've been talked about for a little while, they haven't really been widely adopted. And I think there's potentially that opportunity now that they're starting to mature for more people to kind of take advantage of them, and as they move to having more services and more different services in the cloud. I think it can solve a few more problems for a few more people. So I thought it sounded like a great opportunity at the right time.
Awesome. And with that, I believe we've covered all of the questions that we have currently waiting. If you have more, please feel free to post them on our Discuss forums or save them for next time. As a round of closing thoughts, for all of our panelists, please feel free to tell the community what you're excited about, what you're working on, where you may be virtually for conferences, anything that you want to showcase. The floor is yours.
All right, I'll go first. I kind of let the cat out of the bag a little bit. We've got some big expansions planned for our observability tutorial. It's going to become an observability collection. We're going to add in Jaeger. We're going to add in Kit's dashboards. We've got some other surprises planned. I don't know. I kind of somehow I want to showcase Daniel's streaming within a dashboard. And now I'm getting too meta, but and then also I'll be speaking at the HashiCorp booth at KubeCon on the 17th of November. And we're going to do an overview of Consul CRDs for Consul Kubernetes. And there may, don't tell anybody, there might be a little waypoint thrown in there, time allowing.
Yeah, I can go next. I'm pretty excited about like the variety of server metrics changes that we're making. It's small stuff, but if you look for it, you can find it. There's little details everywhere that I hope I improved. So check that out. If you have a dashboard, maybe there's more labels for you. It's going to be great. I guess just to vamp a little bit more about the snapshot enhance feature. It was called Snapshot. It originally was called Snapshot Inspect Enhance. And what do you do when you inspect a snapshot? Well, you enhance the snapshot. So there was a running joke on the Consul Foundations team. It's just Consul Foundations team hours now. It was Snapshot Enhance. And we just kind of carried it for a while. So yeah, check out metrics, Snapshot Enhance. Sarah Christoph did a lot of great work on that. And that's all I got.
I'm really excited to hear from our community about all these changes, like working on all these things. It's great, but it's really like hearing from all of you about how you're able to take advantage of it or what you see coming next from that. So I think, yeah, there's a lot of changes going in, and I think really excited to get that feedback and see how we're doing and hope that helps like drive future changes.
Awesome. And my last words are going to be, please feel free to follow us on Twitter at HashiCorp, as well as at HashiCorp users. We promote all of our different events out there, from community office hours to our Friday live code streams on HashiCorp Live, to other events where we are either speaking or running workshops. So please feel free to follow us on Twitter. Again, ask your questions on Discuss and provide feedback through the platforms we have. Thank you all so much for joining us on this wonderful Wednesday. Be excellent to each other. Have a good rest of your day.